Welcome, everyone. I'd like to call to order our monthly meeting of the Avon Board of Education at 7:01 p.m. on March 21st, 2023. To get us started, I would like to do a roll call for all of our guests tonight to know who is sitting up here in front of you. I will start with board members and myself. I am Deborah Shute. I am the chair. We have Thage Singh, our vice chair.
Here, Deb, thank you.
Jeff Fleischman, our secretary.
I'm here, thank you.
Jackie Blay is joining us virtually this evening. Laura Young.
Present, thank you.
Lynn Katz.
Present, thank you, Deb.
Liz Summercorn.
Present.
Sarah Thompson.
Present, thank you.
And Nicole Russo.
Present, thank you.
And our administrators are Dr. Carnamola, our superintendent.
Present, thank you.
Mr. Giannini, our assistant superintendent.
Here, thank you.
Mr. Medic, our assistant superintendent.
Present, thank you.
Ms. Russo, our business manager.
Present, thank you.
Ms. Sardinskis, executive assistant to the superintendent and board clerk.
Present, thank you.
Thank you. If you would join me in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Before we begin the business of the meeting, I always like to read our mission statement to remind us all of why we gather together to do this work. Our mission is to inspire in each student a joy and passion for learning and a commitment to excellence, personal integrity, and social responsibility. And this is always our perfect segue into our recognition portion.
I think you're going to turn it over to me tonight to
Yes,
start?
if you would like to. Dr. Carnamola.
March is a different month for us in terms of recognition for the Board of Education because nationally it's known as recognition for Board of Educations as a whole and Board of Education members. So as much as it embarrasses our Board of Education members, we like to start our March meeting with a little bit of recognition for all of you for the work that you do tirelessly next to us as faculty, staff, and school district administrators on behalf of all of the students and the families and the community members in Avon. For many of you who may not know, these are not paid positions. These are elected officials who spend countless hours with us working on everything from curriculum to budgets, and a lot of time and effort that no one sees behind the scenes goes into every meeting that you see here. So I just want to take a moment and express my gratitude for all that you do for me on behalf of everybody here in the Avon Public Schools. We have a few tricks up our sleeve tonight. Obviously, you've probably figured some of them out already to recognize you and thank you for your work and also showcase our talented and bright students. Mr. Strick, I'd like to ask if you and our players might want to join us. And I'd like to thank you all again for coming out tonight. I know there was absolutely nothing else that any of you had to do on a Tuesday night at 7.
Good evening, everyone. Testing. So these are our Avon Achievers for tonight, Dr. C. So they are being recognized for their efforts at TBS, but they do have a special presentation to start with, so I will turn it over to them.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The students here are some members of the TBS Chamber Ensemble. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to present and perform for you tonight.
Our TBS Chamber Group's philosophy is built on 3 principles: responsibility, leadership, and collaboration. We are a student-led group that strives to become better musician leaders through performances in the TBS community.
We set a positive example for the rest of the students that embodies the TBS care traits. We enjoy participating in a group that showcases our skills and gives us the opportunity to make someone's day brighter.
One of our performance traditions is to perform Happy Birthday for staff members on their special day. We know that Mr. Giannini has recently had his birthday, and our chamber group would be happy to help him celebrate.
Sorry, Mr. G.
Thank you in advance for listening. Thank you for supporting the music programs in our community at TBS.
So if you would all stay when you are done, I just want to make sure, Mr. Duffy, that they know to do that, because we also, as you know, are recognizing you for your efforts at TBS, and the board would like to recognize you by giving you some certificates and getting your picture, because you are much younger and better looking than all of us. We'd like to put you behind us and take a nice picture for you and your families. Just don't leave when you're done. Thank you. So, Mr. Duffy, I thought it would be a good segue. We have, one of the things that we have been doing every year for the last few years is trying to focus on, obviously, the achievement of our students and our faculty and staff as we also work to show the board our appreciation. We'd like to show you what it is that the community is investing in and the fruits of the labors that you are putting into this board. So, Ms. Sardinskas, if you could grab, we have some things that our students have put together for all of you, for our Board of Ed reps from high school and also for all of our elected Board of Education members. I think you'll find their artwork and their notes of appreciation to be some of the best parts of tonight. And TBS this year, I think you may remember, we did this last year. I think we did it from AMS also. TBS this year decided to put together a presentation for you and to show off their technology skills in 5th and 6th grade. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Duffy.
And I'm not sure, Christine, if you're driving.
I'll drive the bus.
So there's a presentation that we need to pop up. If you want to finish passing those out, that's fine too. And at this time, I would like to call up our student council representative, Cooper Brown. And Cooper, we'll just do it this way, it's probably easier. Yeah. Cooper and his partner put together a presentation to show their appreciation on behalf of our school as representatives of Thompson Brook School. But Cooper is the only one who could be here tonight. Neil Aurora is not feeling well, so wasn't able to present tonight. So once we get it up, we're going to get it going. Cooper? And
in the meantime, while we get it going, if I could, I'd like to point out a couple of things. We have some swag in these bags. As you know, we have a new mascot that the students chose at the middle school. I'd like to thank AMS, who had their black bears put on a dish towel. We all need those. And also made you little, going along with the March theme of St. Patrick's Day. They say, "We're lucky to have you," and they're signed by AMS on the back. And a number of kindergarten cards, letters, and so on. I think there's at least one of them that may ask you to do some things that you probably can't do as board members, fixing lunches and the like, maybe offering hot dogs more often. But we didn't censor any of the cards. They're all in there. Thank you.
So, as Mr. Duffy said before, me and my friend Neil, we created a slideshow for you to show our appreciation at TBS for all you do for not just TBS, but all of Avon and our education. So, yes, we have all your names. So, yes, to show our gratitude, we have created a slideshow for you to share a few personal messages of gratitude.
Thank you, Jackie Blaya, for all that you do for TBS. Thank you, Jackie Blaya, for all that you do for TBS.
You might get thanked twice.
Thank you, Devshu, for all you do for Avon. Thank you, Devshu, for all you do for Avon.
This one better be 3 times.
All right, Jeff, come back to you. Some personal things.
It's the joys of Google. The permissions aren't set right.
Great, you think it.
Thank you, Lincas, for all you do to Avon. Thank you, Lincas, for all you do to Avon.
Thank you, Nicole Rousseau, for all that you do for TBS. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Sage Singh, for all that you do for our school.
Thank you, Laura Young. We appreciate your work. Thank you, Laura Young. We appreciate your work. Thank you, Laura. Thank you.
Maybe be thanked 3 times.
We appreciate your work.
Okay. So now is the part of our presentation to show our appreciation, where we took pictures of what makes Thompson Brook, and what you have obviously funded for us to create and learn and explore. So this is just a couple photos, and then. So this is our. These pictures were taken in February during Black History Month, where we had displays of writing and pictures with poems attached to them. And throughout all of our hallways, we have creative pieces of writing, artwork, etc. And these might be some of the projects you might see throughout the hallways.
All right, so we have all 3 categories.
Little off cue. Okay. So now we have our library where we have different projects, like you can make buttons. We have, I think we're currently in the coding unit. We also make our TBS logo out of Rubik's Cubes, and we also make different friendship bracelets, and obviously you can check out books because it's, well, a library. Yeah, so now we have our recess, probably the favorite part of the day for some students. And then we also have classrooms with learning. But at recess, there's different games that people play, and there's different activities, and everybody's very inclusive. Everybody has something to play. Yeah.
Ready?
Worked. But as you also saw earlier, we have different performing arts and artwork throughout the hallways. Like we have our orchestra, band, we also have chorus, and we have different clay sculptures and pictures that are made by students in our art class, which is directed by Mrs. Brewer. Yeah, and we just have different quotes from students.
Thank you, Board of Education.
So in the end, the whole point of this presentation was to say thank you to all of you for what you do for Avon and Thompson Brook and all the schools, because education is very valued and it's very important what you do, even if it's not recognized by everybody. So we're trying to recognize you tonight.
Thank you, Cooper. Sorry about the technology glitches there, but on behalf of Thompson Brook and all of the schools in Avon, we appreciate everything you do for us and love our working relationship. So happy Board of Education Appreciation Month.
Thank you, and thank you again to all of our students, both here tonight and out in the schools, and faculties, staff, and administrators who got together to put this together for all of you this evening. We don't get very many opportunities to thank you this way, so I apologize that I might have caused some embarrassment, but I think it was important to everyone here tonight to be able to see it also, and not to wait until we cleared the room to say thank you. So at this point, I will turn it back to you, Ms. Shute, so we can go back to our normal business of recognizing the good work that all of you are doing.
So while that is very humbling and mildly embarrassing, we are always very grateful, and that was incredibly kind of you to put that together on our behalf. I love seeing the students perform. Having you create messages for each one of us is just so heartfelt, and this is what it's really all about. So we're thrilled that we have parents in the room with us. We have students in the room tonight. We know you had to make time last month to try to meet with us, and you were willing to come back in March, so we are so grateful for you. And now we get to recognize from each of the buildings more students and staff. So I'm going to actually ask Ms. Wallace and Mr. Suma to come forward for the middle school. Let me give a little bit of instruction, actually. I know Dr. Carnamola kind of spoke to it, but once someone's name is called, we will have you come up, and Dr. Carnamola and I will shake your hand, give you a certificate, and then we ask if you can go around the table to the side here. We'll gather together for a group photo.
Could Scott Parkinson and Kirsten Markowski please come up? The NASA Plant the Moon Challenge is a research initiative and a collaborative science experiment where students apply for and get lunar soil where they plant vegetable crops. Mr. Parkinson and Ms. Markowski led a group of 30 students over a 10-week period to design experiments and test them to grow these crops in simulated lunar soil. They applied for a grant through NASA, and they were awarded so. And they've been working hard after school with this group of students to conduct these experiments. For that, we thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Suma. And thank you, Ms. Markowski and Mr. Parkinson. The work that they're doing with students is pretty unreal to even consider that we're growing what could be lunar crops within the circular building on West Avon Road. So thank you. It was all designed that way intentionally. All right, so I have the distinct pleasure of recognizing a number of our Avon Middle School students this evening. So each year, the Connecticut Music Education Association invites middle school students from across the state to regional honor festivals. Now, in these festivals, students comprise the regional bands, jazz bands, orchestras, and choirs. The audition process is extraordinarily rigorous, and acceptance to the ensembles is highly competitive. The Connecticut Northern Region includes over 40 school districts and private institutions. Students who elect to participate typically dedicate months of work in preparation for their audition. On Saturday, I think I'm looking ahead on the calendar. On Saturday, January 7th, over 50 Avon Middle School students auditioned and 26 were accepted to the regional ensembles. We are extremely proud to report that the Avon Middle School will be represented in all 4 ensemble strands at the festival: the Connecticut Northern Region Band, Jazz Band, Orchestra, and Choir, a rarely achieved accomplishment. So, at this point, I'd like to call up our students that we're recognizing this evening. As I call you up, come on up front. And Dr. Carnamola has a beautiful certificate. I didn't even see her come up on my left. We couldn't have timed that better to recognize you. And so I'd ask that we hold our applause for the end. And then at the end, students, please stay up front with us so we can grab a nice photo of you, okay? So as you grab the certificate, you're going to come around the board table, recognize the board members, and shake hands, and then head over there for a photo. Everyone got the directions. There will be a quiz after, okay? All right. Jai Verman. Oscar Blanc Terral. I didn't see Oscar. We could still clap for him. Tonight is also the tech night for the AMS musical, The Little Mermaid Junior. It's a busy time of year, so we will still recognize our students who are working away at the middle school right now. Ryan Dalka. Congratulations, Ryan. Pooja Gopal. Tech crew. Arnav Wadwa. Tarini Ganaraju. Cassette Shampoo. Tech night. Ryan Curran. Jinglu Hu. Lulu. Congratulations. Nathaniel Lee. Russell Lynn. Should I start the Russell chant? No, you're good. Okay. William Shin. Aaron Mukherjee. Congratulations, Aaron. Mahanur Ahmed Islam. Abaya Vetraville Gurusamy. Gabi Carvalho. Sebi Lawton. Sophia Mukiacharo. Muchacharo. It was the name that was giving me worry for the last half hour. Julia Pizzi. Paige Sinclair. Julia Sterenberg. Olivia Tonin. Angela Zhao. Sammy Briva, I'm not going to say it correctly, but those of you who know Sammy in the room know exactly who I'm talking about. Bri Ravahala. It was my best bet. Now I want to do a quick scan and make sure I got everyone on my list. No. We have a few certificates that we... are there any middle schoolers in here who I did not call? Okay. Oh, yeah, sure, bring them on. We haven't done TBS yet. I believe that's coming. Yep, thank you. Okay. All right, before they take the microphone away from me, the last person in the room I'll recognize is Kayla Crystal Thurston, our strings teacher at both Pine Grove and the middle school. And we'll also thank Jeff Sorois, our band director, and Jane Sitars, our choral director at the middle school, for all their work in supporting our students to their wonderful accomplishments. And last but certainly not least, thank you to the families who not only drive to and from all of these different rehearsals and auditions, but also provide all of the other supports that come into play to make your students who they are. So thank you for your partnership. Have a good night.
All right, now we'll gather for a group photo, and any parents that would like to take an image, feel free to come in the center and you can grab them as well. You want to recognize them, right? Yeah. So one more congratulations to our AMS building staff and students. We know how much time and effort goes into practicing for that. I had students of my own who auditioned, and so I know that that's very exciting, and we are so proud of you, and you should be proud of yourselves. So thank you again for taking the time to celebrate with us. One more round of applause for the middle school. Oh, okay, thank you. All right, now we have the benefit of calling back up our Thompson Brook students that already performed for us and showed us what they're capable of. So we're incredibly grateful to them. Mr. Duffy, if you wouldn't mind coming on back. I don't know if you have Ms. Salvatore with you or not.
She could not make it
That's
tonight,
totally
so just me. Come on up.
Hey, we'll call them one by one. How about that?
Yep,
Just to make
yep,
sure
I
that-
will. I'll give you, do you have the certificates?
Yep, we're good.
I'd be happy to do that.
You want to do them for me? Thank you.
Or you can give it to them when they come up?
Sure.
I'll just, okay.
Okay.
Sure.
All right, come on up. You can come stand here right now, and first I
wanted
need
to
to
point
talk
out
about
again
you.
that what
First
you
I need to
s-
present you, and then you will go up and collect your certificate, and then we'll take a picture.
I just wanted to point out again for everyone that's with us tonight that what these students did tonight for the Board of Ed is an example of what they do in the building, just one example. So these are a core group of our students that are known for giving a little bit of extra school spirit and positive school climate and bringing smiles to people's faces by performing like you saw here when it's staff birthdays, at meetings, and just every once in a while coming to a classroom to perform. And that is why we wanted to recognize you tonight for all of the positive school climate you promote and the smiles that you put on people's faces at TBS. Thank you very much.
And I would just add that this is a entirely student-led group. This is not run by Mr. Strick or myself or anyone else. And these students manage their own time and plan out their week well in advance, so they try to hit anyone whose birthday falls within the daily schedule. And I just want to recognize Ashley Hazel as kind of the one who spearheads the group and plans and keeps the group together. So congratulations to all of you as Avon Achievers and to Ashley. All right, I'm going to call your name, and you're going to walk up to Ms. Shute and Ms. Carnamola and get your certificate, and you'd like them to meet in the same spot?
Yep, thank you.
For a picture. You'll meet behind the board as the last group did. So first, Ashley Hazel, if you want to go up.
Shake hands for
Isabella Genoff.
This is what's wrong with this. There you go, baby. Hang on, I just saw you.
Natalie Zhu.
The other way before. There you go, Sarah. Natalie, right? Yep.
This is so, you did a beautiful job.
Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you very much.
Sarah Prado.
Oh, Sarah. I just handed yours to someone else. We'll fix that.
Thank you so much for doing
Leah
that.
Chen.
That was beautiful. Here we are. That was so nice of you, honey. You do a beautiful job. They're lucky to have you in the building.
Nice to see you.
Elin Carboni.
Such a nice job, honey. Good job presenting.
Thank you for coming.
Max Wang.
You did a great job.
Thanks, Max.
And Gabby Grossman.
Good to see you. I'm surprised you're in this group. That's fabulous.
So these are our TBS Avon Achievers for the month.
All right. So we'll do, parents are welcome to come in the center again and take photos if you would like.
Okay, we'll do this the same way as last time, but let's look to the left here first. Middle.
I'm so glad that Mr. Duffy shared this as a student-led group, because that makes it that much more meaningful and special, and I hope it's a tradition that carries on, because you definitely put a lot of smiles on people's faces tonight, so I can only imagine what it's like in the building. So thank you for being a part of that energy and for caring so much about your school community. We really value that. So one more round of applause for Thompson Brook. All right, next, Dr. Lockhart for the high school. I don't know if you have Mr. Lee with you or Dr. DeVivo.
Well, they set me up here all by myself.
Okay.
It's just me. Good evening, everyone. So I am here to showcase to you all one of our very amazing students. Her name is Spria Darren, and she was awarded the Silver Key in the Scholastic Art and Writing Awards competition for a short story she wrote called The Unripe Mango. And I actually read this story, and it brought me to tears. It was so good. So she is here tonight. Oh, she's right here. I also found out earlier this week that she has written her own book and actually self-published that book. And so she has copies. If any of you would like one of those books, you can ask her for it.
Just like to say, Spriha, also that I shared your story with everyone. Everyone has had the chance to read it, and thank you again for being a shining example of the kinds of students that we hope to be able to graduate here from Avon Public Schools. Your story was excellent, and I appreciate that you entered into the contest, and even better that you won. Thank you. Congratulations.
Yes. Yes.
Just want to thank you for your patience, as the board also, and all of you here tonight. Took a little bit longer than usual, but we had a number of students, as you could see, and with our snow interrupting our last meeting, we had to reschedule some that should have been last month. So we appreciate that we were able to have the time to fully recognize all of these students and our faculty.
And I just want to do one last congratulations to Spria. I had the advantage, along with the rest of the board, to read The Unripe Mango, and it was quite impressive. I would encourage everyone to take a moment. She writes so beautifully, I thought it was possibly a true story, and she just verified that it isn't. So for any board members, you can feel a little relief, because there's some danger involved, and I'm glad she's in one piece, so it's all good. But it's written so beautifully, so it's really worth the time. She did a beautiful job, and I just can't wait to see what she publishes in the future, and we can say she's one of ours. So congratulations one last time. So now, for all of you who came for this portion of the meeting, we will not be offended if you would like to excuse yourselves and take back your evenings. We appreciate that you made the time for us, and we thank you for coming. All right. Let them shuffle a bit. All right, as they're moving out, we will move on to the business of the meeting. I'm looking for a motion to approve the Board of Education regular monthly meeting minutes of February 28th, 2023. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
All right, thank you, Paige.
Sir.
And do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Lynn. All in favor? Aye. And can we get a visual on Jackie if she agrees? Okay, then we'll do the 8 of us as it passes. Is she there? She gives the 9? Okay, we're good. Thank you very much. All right, next is communication from the public. I'm not sure if anyone signed up on the sheet. Is there anyone here who came for this portion of the meeting? I'll just have Christine take a quick look. All set? All right, thank you. We'll move on to items of information and proposals. So first, we have our student representatives, Charlotte Perry and Lillian Peng from the high school.
Before I give my report, I just wanted to thank the organizer of these cards. They're absolutely beautiful, and I greatly appreciate them. Okay, so first I'm going to start with AHS. The past 2 weeks have been pretty crazy. Seniors are presenting our capstones. I know I am tomorrow, so I'm definitely nervous about that, but you know, we're going to get through it. And then spring sports started this week. I believe track, golf, lacrosse, all the others are in full-fledged right now. People are definitely excited about it, and luckily today was really warm, so I know people had a lot of fun. Footloose will be on the AHS stage at the end of April, so I know theater practice is in full-fledged, and our Best Buddies Club invites AHS students to participate in the Best Buddies Friendship Walk, also at the end of April. So that is also a big buzz around school. Next is Avon Middle School, and they are announcing their production of Disney's The Little Mermaid Jr., which we also heard during the awards earlier tonight, which is on March 24th and the 25th. The AHS robotics team went to the state championships this weekend. Haven't heard about an update for that, but I'm assuming it went well given their track record. The parent-teacher conferences were last week, and the Leo Club has been holding a fundraiser for Dog Star Rescue. Lastly, for Thompson Brook School, they competed in the CT State Chess Association tournament, and they won the middle school state championship, which is extremely exciting. Their school musical, Peter Pan, they now have tickets on sale, and students are participating in the March of Dimes, which I remember I was a big supporter of when I was there, a big reading competition, so that's very exciting.
Update, yes, the Avon Middle School robotics team secured a spot at the World Champions. Again, 2 spots.
For Roaring Brook School, they just celebrated Read Across America at the start of March, and they hosted a hallway read with everybody. They've been hosting readathons and are just generally encouraging a lot more reading around the school. They're going to be hosting the children's author David Kelly on March 22nd, so that's tomorrow. And they're also enjoying their participation in the Bridges program, and they're looking forward to the final event, which is a field trip to Barnes & Noble, so very book-based this month. For Pine Grove School, their report cards were released March 8th, and then they had parent-teacher conferences on the 9th and 10th. And Booster-thon starts today and goes until March 30th, and they're all going to be able to learn leadership and kind of demonstrate a greater sense of community while exercising to raise money for the school. So overall, good. I do have to go because SATs are tomorrow.
We understand, ladies, and I know with your capstone too, Charlotte, if you're nervous about that, don't feel concerned.
I'm very prepared and ready.
I believe you are. I don't doubt that at all. We're rooting for you. Excellent. Next, we'll move on to our financial report with Ms. Russo.
Good evening. We did not meet this month, so we didn't have a report.
Excellent, thank you. And now moving on to committee reports, Jackie was able to share with me, we did not have a curriculum and professional practices meeting, and also when it gets down to correct, she wasn't able to attend that one, so that checks off both of those committees. Finance, Lynn.
Yes, we did not have a meeting either this month, but we would have one April 18th, am I correct? Good, April 18th.
Thank you, Lynn. Negotiations, we are still trying to put together dates with the board members who are on the committee along with administrative assistants, but we're just at the very beginning of that. Policy, Laura.
At our subcommittee meeting, we had a second read of the student discipline policy, and we also took a look for a first read at the gifted and talented policy, as well as the retention of records and information, and you will see all of those tonight to be discussed with the possibility of action on at least maybe one of them.
All right, thank you, Laura. Next is the chair's report. One more time, just want to say how impressed I am with our student body. This is a handful of students that we got to recognize tonight. Knowing how much talent is spread all throughout our district is very exciting and very humbling as a board member to have those cards made for us. Absolutely love them. The handwriting, the artwork, the jokes that they put in there. I get a good chuckle out of it, so I really appreciate that. I do want to turn slightly to a somber note. Unfortunately, we did lose one of our graduating students. Haley Jens passed away over the weekend. She was class of 2018. If we could just take a moment of silence for her. Thank you. Our hearts and thoughts go out to their family. We are heartbroken for them, and we hope that they can get through this difficult time. Superintendent's report.
Thank you. I will start tonight, Mr. Medic, with the hiring report.
Good evening, everyone. As you can see in your packet, the end of February and beginning of March, we have worked to fill quite a few non-certified staff openings that we have had. As I've mentioned, each month we continue to be fully staffed in all certified positions throughout the district. We have found some very qualified candidates to fill paraeducator and interventionist positions over the past few weeks, and we do continue to have some openings that we have to continue to fill. From the report, you'll also see 2 recent resignations. Ms. Mazzini, who joined us recently as administrative assistant at Pine Grove School, returned to her previous district where she had been employed for over 20 years. And Mr. Zahas, our safety and security specialist at the middle school, has resigned, and we do have applicants to fill for that position after an internal staff transfer.
Thank you. Just briefly, Mr. Medic, I know that you and I spoke about this earlier today. I think there's been some questions because of what has been published, for example, in some local newspapers where they publish job openings and so on. As you know, we have a number of job openings right now. Can you just speak to what that process looks like overall?
Certainly. I believe recently the Patch pulled data off of our website. They don't contact us, nor do we advertise with them. They just do a cursory search of local websites and post these as articles. They'd mentioned we had 42 openings throughout the district. Of note, 20 of those are for summer temporary seasonal positions. 6 of them are for, 19 total. 6 of them are for our summer theater program, and 19 of them are for our extended school year program. For those 19 positions, I am confident that we will fill all 19, and many of them have multiple positions. For example, paraeducators, we routinely hire more than 20 for our ESY program, and we'll be able to fully staff that program as we have in years past. We have several openings that are already posted for the 23-24 school year to cover several maternity leaves that we have. We do have several long-term substitute paraeducator and interventionist position because we have taken the individuals who are our permanent employees. Some of them hold certifications, and they are filling long-term substitute certified positions for us through the end of the school year. In addition, we have several positions that we are set to pull off of our website and close as we finalize the hiring and onboarding process for that employee. The last thing that we do as part of our process, once we know that we have an employee, we have onboarded them, and we have a start date, we close the position on the website. That allows us to ensure that we can continue to receive applicants for those positions in the event that our candidate of choice withdraws their candidacy or chooses not to join us after an offer has been made. We will be posting several anticipated openings for certified staff positions based on retirements that will be for next school year, either by the end of this month or early in April. So at this point, we continue to receive applications for positions for all of our positions. Some of our non-certified service positions have posed a little bit more of a challenge in hiring in nutrition services, but we maintain a regular job posting for those that are ongoing throughout the year, as well as for several positions such as homebound tutors and substitute or on-call school nurses. So 42 does seem like a lot, but they're very well managed for all of us at this point, and many of them don't have, of the positions posted, don't have start dates until after July 4th.
Thank you, Mr. Medic. I know that there had been some questions from board members after seeing that article, so I appreciate you clarifying. The enrollment report, now Not much change from last month, except, again, we are up three students from the same time last year. Thought it was interesting. As you know, we heard earlier from Representative Curry in our ECS funding presentation that one of the things that is considered is the number of students. And one of the things I think we have to always remember is that, generally speaking, when the number of students is publicized for any reason, budgetary or state reporting, it's the October 1 number. So, for example, we are actually up in the number of students at this time than we were last year, and we've been creeping up all year long, but I think it was mentioned that we had a decrease in the overall number of students from the previous year. It's actually not the case at this point, but it may have looked that way as of October 1st. And with that, I think we'll shift gears into the, we put together, you have that from me, right? So we've had quite a number of conversations as an administrative team, as faculty and staff, and also certainly as a Board of Education over the last few years, in particular, pre and post pandemic, related to the kinds of supports that we have in place for our students. And I know that as of late, both I and others from central office, our administrators, and some of our faculty and staff members also have answered a number of questions related to what the district has in place and is doing to support the needs of all of our students. I think it's a timely conversation because as you look across the news in the nation, you see a lot of news related to the number of mental health supports that have increased among both children and adults, issues related to family resources and incomes, and something else we heard this evening, the increasing numbers across the state, including here in Avon, of students who qualify and families who qualify for free and reduced lunch, students who are English language learners. And so we put together a broad view of what our, I would call, whole child services and family services look like here in the district. We wanted to share that with you tonight. I'm going to share this presentation as a whole with you also. We literally put, as you know, I did this within the past week or so with the assistance of the administrative team. So we were literally putting some of the last pieces together for this before we came over here this evening, which is why I didn't get it to you in advance. But it is a fairly comprehensive look at it, I think, without getting too much down into the weeds here as we speak to you about it. But there are a number of links that you'll find when we turn this over to you also that have a number of examples of the kinds of things that you'll hear about tonight. And I know that most, if not much, of what you'll hear tonight are things you already know as a Board of Ed, but I thought it important to put together from start to finish to look at it in a comprehensive way, given the kinds of conversations that we've been having about attendance, about mental health supports, about discipline. We have the new discipline policy on the agenda for this evening, for example. And so I want to thank all of the administrators that are here with us tonight, because not only, of course, did you come tonight for the meeting, and I always appreciate that, and the board does also. It was a lot of diligent efforts behind the scenes to put this together throughout the last week or so. Thank you, Mr. G, Mr. Medic, Ms. Fox, Ms. Arnold, Ms. Ferry, and Ms. Krasansky, and all of the building principals that you're going to hear from this evening. It was, I think, a fun project a little bit. You can give me a little bit of leeway on that. I'm not sure about their faces out there. In that, I think we worked together in a different way, as you'll see. We thought it was important to have you hear about this, not just from us sitting here at the table with you, but from our building administrators, who are really the people that have to make sure that all of these systems and processes that we have in place are managed and carried out on the ground in the schools. So hearing about it and what our systems and processes look like from us is one thing. Hearing about it from all of the other administrators that I have here with us tonight to talk to you about what the processes look like throughout the school district and to share some individual examples from each of the schools, I think will shine a different light on it for you. And I just wanted to point out also, Christine, if you could go to the next slide, sorry, that one of the things we have been thinking a lot about, as you know, we're always trying to connect everything that we do back to our blueprint for excellence that we have worked on as both a school district and as a Board of Education. And I think that much of what you will see here tonight and hear about will be directly connected back to things that you know we have talked about together and goals that our board members had in mind and objectives as we put together the strategic plan. So I'm going to pause here for a moment and turn it over to Mr. G to go through the next piece of it before we ask all of you to come forward. Just pointing out that when we talk about multiple learning pathways, I think that we are often talking about a career path, a college path, going into the military, providing different classes and experiences for students here in the district. But the other way to think about this as a student learning pathway is what we provide to our students, both as a whole and individually, over the course of the time that our students are with us. And for any individual student, that might be one particular service at one point in their career with us and something entirely different later, and no supports besides typical academic supports at other times for them. So I think it's important for us to think about this particular focus area related to student learning in this way from a pathway standpoint, and also that our goals are to continue to look at data that informs our teaching and learning, but also to support the continuous growth of our students in every way possible, their social emotional growth, their academic growth. And I'll turn it to you, Mr. G, at that point. Thank you.
So before we turn it over to our principals and directors, we just wanted to kind of frame out the presentation for you. We felt like it was important to note that student supports is really a system of resources. No one piece operates alone. They work in tandem. So as you hear about the four pieces this evening, just know that they inform one another, and there's a fluidity to it where oftentimes we're communicating back and forth between each part of the process. Each, serves its own unique purpose and is important to the work that we do. As you hear from our administrators this evening, each of their slides is framed out as goals because each piece of student supports has its own unique goal that it seeks to achieve. They all have their own unique structure, so in the role that they play, they work in different ways to do different pieces. There's also something about communication because it's always important for us to keep our students, our families, and our staff informed about the process, how our students are doing, what next steps are, and then finally about challenges and next steps. And so when we think about challenges, what we know is that when our students are struggling, it's a difficult thing. Families are dealing with that as well. And so each child comes with its own, his or her own unique needs. And that's part of the challenge. When we think about academic needs, they often fit a more uniform or prescribed, something that we see on a more routine basis. So we have a more standard set of interventions that we can provide. When we think about a student and a family who might be struggling with a social emotional need, oftentimes based on their background, their unique experiences, we need to really create something unique for them. So that's part of the challenge that student services faces. And then when we think about next steps, of course, as time goes on and students come to us with different needs, different challenges, different things that are happening out in the world that impact them, we're always working to improve the process and look at how we can better serve our students. So as we go through each of the four parts this evening, know that the presentation is framed out around those four components as well. So getting us started is data teams. So we have Bill and Stephanie.
I just want to make sure the board is aware also, we were looking for this to be a way to share information with you, but also to engage in a discussion. So Each part of this, as I mentioned, we have different team presented to you to give you examples from their respective schools. But you might have a question about what it looks like in practice in another school, and we can certainly answer that also. I think it's important to note that everything you'll hear tonight exists in one way or another throughout the schools, but it looks different based on different grade levels, or we might call it by a different name, again, based on a developmental need or the like in different schools. So thank you again, Mr. Duffy and Dr. Lockhart, for being here tonight.
You're welcome. And we're going to start by talking about our data teams. And as you can see, our goal tonight is to talk about the oversight and accountability of two of our data teams. One is our academic, and the other is our social emotional data team, so we can track students in different areas. The structure, we do have multi-level teams. We have not only our school-wide teams, we occasionally have grade-level teams, but also individual teachers are looking at their own data. My job, my first job here tonight is to give an example of our school-wide data team at Thompson Brook School. So we have our academic data team that consists of the administrators in the building, our reading consultant, 2 teachers, and our school psychologist. And that team meets 4 times a year. We meet at the start of the year, and then we meet after our fall, winter, and spring assessments. And what we do is we look at various data. Academically, we look at our SBAC scores when they first come in. We have our Ames Web reading and math scores. We have our benchmark assessment reading scores. We have our NGSS science scores. We have our unit assessments in each of our core academic areas. So we meet at the beginning of the year and we look at all the data for our incoming students. And what we do is we then create a watch list for students who come in where we look at the data and say, there might be some concern here for students as they move through the beginning of the year. And we will create that watch list for students who don't already have a plan. Some students may come in with individual education plans or 504 plans or student assistance team plans or English language learner plans. And we will use the data to actually confirm that those plans are working as well. But we also then have a host of students who might not have a specific support that the data is saying we might need to look at this. So it informs the teachers of the students coming into their classrooms at the start of the year. We then connect as a school-wide data team with those teachers and say, this is what we're seeing. And as you go through the beginning of the year, collect your own data. And then after we get when we get to our fall assessments, we'll review this. So then fall, winter, and spring, we reassess after each administration of our Ames Web or a benchmark scoring. And after, for example, in the fall in October, we get that first round of data, we'll look and we'll compare that to the students on our watch list. And many times, students new to Avon, we just put on that watch list just to keep an eye on and do a double check to make sure that they are accessing the curriculum. And so if we then see the data that says, yeah, this student on our watch list, it looks like they're really not performing the way we'd like to see them performing after the first 2 months of school, we will then, as a school-wide team, send a referral to our student assistance team. And that then gets scheduled to have a more in-depth meeting where we pull in the individual teachers and we get a core team of teachers and other support service personnel to look a little closer at that student. And then determine if there are interventions that need to be put in place. In this case, it's typically a reading or a math intervention. Sometimes it's in class where we're just asking the teachers to do more specific small group instruction or one-to-one instruction and work with the teacher to come up with a plan. It might be some push-in instruction for our interventionist. It might be some pull-out instruction as well, depending on the needs that we find. And then we have our student assistance team process that goes in 6 to 8 week cycles of progress monitoring and setting goals, progress monitoring, and revisiting with each assessment cycle. We also have our social emotional data team, which consists of our school psychologist, our school social worker and our school counselor and the 2 administrators. And we look at attendance data, we look at nurse visit data, we look at counseling logs, we might look at referrals for behavioral issues as well. And we then go through that same cycle of determining if there's a student in need, we'll refer to that social emotional student assistance team and have more conversation about what the needs of that particular student are. Usually, as Mr. G said, it's individual needs and there's some individual counseling, but sometimes the data informs other groups. This year we put together an executive functioning group after we looked at the data and had some conversations and realized that that would be an efficient way to meet the needs of a group of students. So we have a lot of data, and when you get and are able to click on the links, you'll see some of the things we do. We know that the data is not the student, but it does allow us to ask some targeted questions to get at the root causes of what we need to do to support each of these students that come through our system. So that's our school-wide data, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Lockhart.
Thank you. So as Dr. Carnamola said, we have very similar processes across the schools. They may just operate in different ways at different times and be called different things. So at the high school, we have a collaborative team of teachers that meet weekly, and they do some of the things that you just heard Mr. Duffy talk about, things such as reviewing curriculum, identifying the skills that our students need to have and some of the competencies that we expect them to develop as they go through each course. We expect those teams to meet to really establish proficiency standards for each of the courses and for each of the grades. They sometimes come together to create both formative and summative assessments and then actually implement those assessments and then analyze the data once they have done that. And then they likewise, at CBS, they collaborate to ensure that students who maybe are not making the progress that we hope to see, we collaborate with that team as well as with some larger teams to see how else we can best support that student. So as the teams meet and they discuss the students who aren't making progress, they may look to get some input from other adults in the building. And so those collaborative teams, they may take those lists of names of students that they find need support to their larger department meetings, which meet twice a month. And then those teams will talk, they'll discuss, they'll look at some of our tiered interventions. If you get a chance to click on that link, you'll see interventions both at a tier 1 level for students who may just need a little bit more of a push in the classroom, and then sometimes at a tier 2 level. And so if at those department meetings they still feel as though they need some more support, some more adults to consult, then they will refer those students to what we call our student support team. And so those are the names that we consider students who may be of concern and who need a little bit more. And so then that team, which consists of our pupil services, our counselors, our administrators, our nurses, then those teams will discuss to see what else we need to put in place. On a larger school-wide level, we have a building leadership team that meets as a data team, and that's involving our coordinators as well as our administrators. And we regularly look at our larger performance data. So most recently, we took a look at our PSAT data for our 11th graders to see what things we needed to put in place for our 12th graders. Not Lillian, she's going to do great. She's going to be a merit scholar. She's going to get a 1,500, I already know. But for some of our other students who may be close to being at proficient, we will meet to see what sort of plans we can put in place, maybe at a department level or at a grade level, to ensure that we're doing what we need to do so that all of our students are scoring at level 3 or above on all of our assessments. One of the things that we really are excited about and looking forward to, you will hear Ms. Ferry discuss right now, is another way for us to collect more data and to analyze data, because we really love data at the high school. So,
can we just pause one moment? You guys were on a roll. Thank you. I just want to pause and make sure that we don't have any other questions about that or want to discuss any pieces of what you just heard.
I have.
Go ahead.
Oh,
I'll go after you.
You sure? Okay.
Definitely.
Mr. Duffy, maybe the question is for you. What system is there in place for the students coming into TBS from Pine Grove and Roaring Brook that need assistance or receiving assistance in their 4th grade year at those schools? How is the information given to you, and how does your school handle that incoming information?
So I think Bill, you can speak to what the transition process looks like from one school to another, right?
Absolutely.
Because
That's a
again, it's
great
similar,
question.
but use the TBS
Right, so
example.
we do have a whole transition process where we inform parents of systems that are in place. We do have a pupil services night for parents of students with 504 or IEP plans, so there is some parent communication with the families before they come in. We also have a lot of communication between the case managers in 4th grade and our special education staff at Thompson Brook School. We have our counselors meet together, our counselors share information. The SAT teams, we now have SAT coordinators at each school, and we share that information. So when they come in, we do have those plans in place. We have a starting point, if you will, and we also look at the data. We may get that last round of data that's given in the spring that the school may not have had its end-of-year data, essentially summative data. So we'll use that as our starting point the following year to start to put together our watch list and begin to develop those plans. But there is communication between schools, principals meet. We just had a transitional meeting last week where we pulled together all of the administrators, case managers, students in special education, who typically have the more involved and complex plans to make sure that we are communicating accurately. Welcome.
Thanks.
I hesitate to ask too many questions, but I have so many because this is incredibly important, and I'm thrilled you're doing this work. I want to talk to maybe an elementary school principal because I think having data teams is so important. You have SAT teams, and having common planning time it's limited. And when you get started on this work, it can take a really long time. So my question to the broad question, I think it might be easier in the high school. I don't know logistically, but how do you make and prioritize time for this? And what can we as a board do to support this important work?
I think that's probably a question that we could answer for the entire district because it does look different from school to school based on what the planning time looks like. Jess, you want to?
Yeah, so at the elementary level, all of our grade levels have common planning time across the week. And so they meet, multiple times to discuss students, to have data teams. And there's a formal data team process, which we do. We have a scope and sequence for the year. So there's formal data teams that come after universal screens, for example. And then we have a more informal process, which is really our teachers meeting on a weekly basis to talk about their students, look at units, look at assessments once they're completed, and plan together. And also to collaborate in terms of if they are seeing trends with students, if there's something they need to work on, within the curriculum. So that's in place K-4. At Thompson Brook, that exists as well, where they have common planning time built into the schedule. And at the middle and high school, they have common planning time as well. And so there's team meetings at the middle schools. And at the high school, they have CLT block twice a week, which they can utilize to meet.
And CLT is what Dr. Lockhart was just speaking about. You know how we like our acronyms. It's basically subject area teams. So the entire math department would get together to look at the data and the formative and the summative assessments, the social studies department, and so on, versus what you might see in K-4, which would be a grade level team meeting, or pre-K to 4, really.
And I heard Dr. Lockhart, you mentioned common assessments, and I think that's has been in the past perhaps a growth area, and now we're heading in that direction, and that's wonderful. So when they meet every week, that's one of the tasks a group of teachers might do is look at a common assessment that they've created together and look at the student responses, that kind of thing.
I think, and I could speak a little bit historically, and Stephanie could pick back up, this is something that actually has been worked on for a number of years already in the district, but it's a work in progress, as it always is, because as course requirements and content changes, they need to continue to revise. And so you could speak maybe to what it looks like right now.
Yes, even tomorrow we have groups of teachers who are coming together to not just write curriculum, but also to write assessments that go along with that curriculum. And that's work that happens very often. They we'll sometimes get results back from an assessment, and after analyzing it, they might come back with the idea that may not have been the students, it may have been how we wrote that question, and so we need to revise that assessment, and that happens pretty regularly at the high school. So.
Okay, Laura?
So we talked about Thompson Brook in the high school. I was just curious what performance data, large performance data, is used at the middle school, and does the middle school model look more like the high school model or more like the Thompson Brook model, or are they kind of a blend?
So it's very much the same data. We have Ames Web that we utilize at the middle school as well, which gives us data in reading and math. Our departments meet on a regular basis to look at their assessment data in science, social studies. Even our unified arts teachers will get together and look at their assessment data as well. So it's very similar to what's happening at the elementary and the high school level.
So you might remember, as part of our strategic plan, when we redid our objectives and goals 3 years ago, losing track of time, we added in Ames Web as to the budget as a mechanism to help us continually track student progress. And so that has been a great help to us in being able to look closely at students' growth over time, even over the course of a year, rather than relying on only assessments that teachers have put together, which are helpful to us to continue an instructional continuum from day to day and month to month and week to week. But Ames Web, being nationally normed, helps us to ensure that we are making progress, at least 1 year's growth in 1 year's time, as we like to, and comparing our students to a broader range of students across the nation.
Thank you for everything. So the data you're referring to, Superintendent, the information we typically see, right? You present this annually to us, right? We look at the Ames Web, we look at the progress over time.
Yes.
That's given to September, October?
Yes.
As part of the progress.
And again in the spring.
So all that work is stemming from what we're hearing today. So that's the fruits of those labors?
Yes.
Of their work?
Yes.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
And I would just add the communication piece. Whenever we have a decision that would refer a student to our student assistance team, the parents are always in the loop at that point. When we feel there is a need for an intervention or additional supports, we do make that phone call home. We do follow up in writing to make sure that parents are part of that process once we identify that there is a need for additional support. So that's a very important part of what we do, and working together is certainly another support that we're able to utilize. So communication's a very important part of this process.
And also at the high school, we do regularly share out with the students, with families, some of the drop-in supports that we have for students who find that on their own, they may need a little bit more support, like our math lab, our writing lab, and our student assistance center. Turn it over to Ms.
And this is the best part, our next steps.
Yeah. All right, as you can imagine, there is a lot of data that's collected, has to be analyzed. So one of the things that we wanted to do as a district is invest in a program that would allow us to take that data and analyze it very quickly, so then we can use it to, one, drive instruction, but also support our students. So that program that we have invested in is called Performance Matters. It's actually a Power School product. It's owned by Power School. The administrators and staff, actually all certified staff, just received an overview this past Friday on Professional Development Day. Our administrators will be receiving training next month, and then our staff will receive it throughout the course of the next year on how to utilize this program. As a former math teacher, this program gives me goosebumps because of the way that what it can do with data, how quickly it can analyze it, how quickly it can actually give us results almost immediately from assessments, not just assessments, but also early warning indicators such as attendance, behavior, discipline. It is a phenomenal tool that I know that will not only allow us to take the data and analyze it quickly, but also support our students almost immediately across the district. In addition, we're looking at other next steps to increase our student voice in this process as well. We can tell our students, parents, teachers, administrators can tell our students where we want them to be and where we want them to go in terms of their progress, but we want to have them be part of this process as well. The middle school is piloting the student-led conferences and also looking at doing goal setting as well and using some of the student-led conferences either at the middle school and elementary and intermediate levels as well.
You just reminded me, Elizabeth, and I hope I don't steal any thunder. I don't think I heard you say this earlier today when we met again from the elementary level, but an example of this too for the next step, I think would be the Golders, right, that are elementary school students. See, there you are, Mrs. Voriel. Allowing even our youngest students to try their hand at their own goal setting and looking at where they need to improve from what they've mastered.
All right, thank you.
Any questions for Elizabeth or left for this? Thank you very much. Just want to point out also, as I have to tie this back into the work that we have done together at this point last year, well, earlier than now because our budget was done. You remember we were having a conversation about adding performance matters into our technology piece of the budget so that we would be able to better track and analyze our data. And so now, again, to Jeff's point, starting to see the fruit of some of those labors and the investment that we have made in this technology. So thank you very much.
So as we think about the data work, it was mentioned that there's an accountability piece there. So the data team process really helps us to identify some larger scale curriculum pieces, instructional pieces that we need to work on. It might identify some students who need some additional supports. And sometimes that's in small group or whole class, and then we start to move on to the next piece of the puzzle, which is our SAT process. And Mr. Sturm and Mrs. Krasansky are here to talk to us about SAT, which is the Student Assistance Team.
Thank you so much, Mr. G, and thank you for inviting us up to talk about what I really think has been among the most significant and positive changes that we've seen in our profession. I started my career 25 years ago this year as a fifth grade teacher, not in Avon, but in a town fairly similar to Avon, high-performing school and a high-performing district. And as a fifth grade teacher, I would have one or two kids with somewhat disappointing regularity arrive in my classroom as effectively non-readers. And I will tell you that, while there's always some exceptions to the rule, by and large, that doesn't happen anymore. It really doesn't happen anymore because partially of our pedagogy, but the data teams is a huge element to it, and understanding where our students are at, being able to know more discreetly their knowledge and how they're growing as learners, we're much better at that than we were 25 years ago. We're really much better at that even than 10 years ago. And so as Jess was saying, the next part in that, in terms of telling the story, is if data teams tell the story of a class or grade level or a broader school, what our SAT process, the Student Assistance Team process, does is look at this individual student story and how best we can support them.
I think what Jess started when he launched this discussion is just, you can see it's happening now as we're trying to explain these different structures to you. You'll see how they are interrelated and separate at the same time. And so the Student Assistance Team is actually known as SAT, so I'll continue to the SAT process exists at all 5 of our schools, and it has for decades. It's something that has been the fabric of what we do to help meet the needs of students. In more recent years, as probably I'm going to go back maybe about 10 years ago when SRBI, or Scientifically Research-Based Interventions, was brought onto the Connecticut State Department landscape, basically formalized that process in a way for us that we've continued to hone over the years. And so the goal of the Student Assistance Team is, as Noam said, is to really get down to individual student level. It's an opportunity for a teacher or a team to come together and share their concerns about an individual student, whether it be academic, behavioral, social challenges in the classroom. This process has been outlined through a number of steps. It starts with creating a well-rounded picture of that student, their strengths, the things that they are able to do. We always like to start from that perspective, the area of concern, and then absolutely a historical perspective. And that historical perspective is an important part of, I think, just linking back to a question that was asked earlier about how we bridge that from one school building to another, is that through this process, when we identify students with needs, because the goal of the student assistance team is to come out with an individual intervention plan for that student, is that that plan doesn't end with a calendar year. So our systems connect when we end our school year. Yes, we have end of the year data that will be looked at the next school year, but if students are in mid-process of an intervention or they haven't met those grade level goals, we don't wait to re-identify them in the fall. From fourth to fifth, well, from every grade level, not even just school bridges, from every grade level, there is a plan in place. If it was in place in June, it's in place in August, September when we start. And those plans are transitioned. They're transitioned through the structure of our process that has starts with a referral or a request for a meeting where we get that picture of that student. It translates to an individual intervention plan that starts at the classroom with tier 1 supports, and then as needed continues to tier 2 and tier 3 supports. And we've created, it went from paper files to a very robust Google folder system to now being really excited. We're in year 3, I think, of using these forms embedded into PowerSchool. So they are part of that record. And now we're going to take it to the next level of Performance Matters, because we're going to be able to document that in a very, to be able to not only have the individual intervention plan and all of the records of those discussions around student supports that we find are necessary, but we'll also be able to do the progress monitoring, which is another part of the communication that Mr. Storm is going to talk about as well.
And so as you see some examples there, all of our schools have different ways that we come together, and typically it is a weekly meeting. We call it front burner at RBS, kids kind of on the front burner. And we look at a whole bunch of different kinds of metrics. Some of those are academics, but we've made an effort to make sure that we're looking at attendance as another one of the metrics. We do look at any kind of conduct concerns or questions that we have. And that team is typically inclusive of somebody like myself, Susan, school psychologist, a school social worker, and obviously the classroom teacher that has the most close knowledge of that student. And so out of that, that's where we make decisions about what would be the best kinds of supports for this child in their journey right then and there. And when you look at this presentation, you'll be able to see what some of the SAT forms look like. They're embedded in there. So that'll give you a sense of what our teams are responsible for, teachers fill out. And again, it serves as a long-term story for the kids. And what is really good news is that these kinds of processes, both data teams, student assistant teams, and then the way that we monitor for student learning growth over time is really indicative of great growth over the course of a school year and great growth over the course of a student's schooling experience. And I think it was Jeff that was saying fruits of our labor. We're really there because we can point to a ton of really positive data points that show as our students move through the grade levels, if we have, I'm making up a number, but if 15% or 20% of our students in kindergarten are at risk for a certain whatever reading kind of a metric, like we bring that down to the single digits by the time that they exit out of our elementary schools, and that's really consistent at both of the buildings. The communication that we utilize, and you can flip to the next slide, Christine, thank you. Some of it was mentioned by Bill and Stephanie before us. We do obviously involve deeply our families as we go through this process, because we have questions. Everybody can better be served by involving our families in them. As a dad with a child who has gone through this process, it's really important to know what that looks like. And so we reach out to families, we make phone calls. There is letters that go home that indicate what kind of tiered supports are going to be best serving that child. And again, there's some samples as it relates to those children. And in terms of our next steps, this is a really, really long-term process. As Jody was saying, this has been part of the fabric of our schools for many, many years. And we get better at it over time through our lens of continuous improvement. And so one of the bigger changes that we have made is the links in terms of technology. So there's no Google Drive crashing or anything in terms of PowerSchool. And that is really, really helpful because we can pull up students' previous experiences in SAT. Like let's say that we have a second grader who maybe first grade was really seamless, but now we have some concerns. Now we can go all the way back to kindergarten and see, oh, you know what, there was a question that was raised here. And so we're doing a really, really positive, good job knowing where kids are at and knowing how to best support them. In terms of the actual process, we have undertaken team reviews. We went through a significant team review several years ago, and the feedback points were, by and large, really just minor tweaks here and there, and so that's indicative of the strength of the team, the strength of the process, and it shows by the fact that we really don't have fifth graders arriving in, I mean, Bill, you could tell me otherwise, but hopefully I'm right. They really don't arrive in fifth grade classrooms as non-readers anymore.
I think I should take an opportunity just to circle back to the first slide, because I don't think it's going to come up again in the presentation. But one of the things, in addition to this process, another system would be our universal screening process that we have in place. Again, something that's required by the State Department of Education as well. But we've started over, we're probably right now in our third edition of the assessment process that we use. We started with very bare bones assessments from Vanderbilt University. Then we kind of built our own that bridged a couple of and used Dibbles, and now we're in our third year of AimsWeb, which you're aware of because we've been sharing that data with you, but we're really excited to say that we now have that K-8. It is a consistent piece that we have that same type of communication, and our teachers are becoming more fluent with the subtests of each of those. We measure students' progress in numeracy and literacy 3 times a year with similar measures. And we're able to make comparative data in each of those movements for students. And then, in addition to that, to get back to the student assistance team, we will identify the students who are presenting with at-risk for making grade level progress, that we use additional diagnostic assessments. And so we're both at the classroom level and at that reading specialist level on that pupil services doing additional diagnostics as well. So and we appreciate the support that you as a board and the budget has allowed us to invest in these type of really powerful assessments and tools.
So we talked about the SAT teams supporting reading, writing, math referrals, and then the social emotional piece. What about communication for students who have, say, in the lower grades, articulation concerns? Is the same process followed, tiered referrals, and what does that look like?
Yes, great question, and same exact kind of a process. So that certainly does come up. We'll have a kindergarten teacher that will say, really, kind of struggling with some intelligibility, articulation, et cetera. And so, yes, so there might be a quick screening that's done through an SLP, or it might be a more formalized process that we decide that a more formal tiered intervention would be appropriate based upon where the child's performance is relative to their peers and kind of where we want them to be. So same process.
And when you have an opportunity to have the presentation and view the links in the SAT request form, and you select the area of concern, you'll see that there's a variety of things beyond just the specifics of reading and math, but there is articulation, there is language-based concerns. And then there's an area there where you can request certain staff members to join the SAT team. Every school has a different structure. Generally, there's a core team, but then you can invite people that more specifically you think will be helpful in that discussion around a student. So all of our related services, our SLPs, our school psychologists, our social workers, special education teachers would frequently join that team, as well as classroom teachers and administrators.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Nicole.
So if a student has been identified and they're getting their services and they hit their goals, are they still going to be continued to be monitored to make sure that they don't regress and that they continue to have sufficient growth?
So that's the other safety net of the universal assessment system. So the idea is a student might be referred and that goal, that short-term goal met, and they might continue. You might see some success in the classroom. Perhaps the next year something might happen where they identify again. That's our 3 times a year screening would help us do. So absolutely, students, if you start to see a pattern, so then that's another job of that team. When you start to see a pattern, then you start to look at, is there a learning need that we're not addressing with that student? When we can catch them up and fill those gaps, and then they continue to learn with the class, the deficit forms again. What are we missing about how to provide that initial core instruction for the student? So that's absolutely, I always describe that universal assessment process as the safety nets. And it's universal, it's all of our students. We never take for granted that just because you're doing well that you will always do well. And so it's really essential that we continue to do that.
Jeff?
I just want to chime in a little bit. I think one of the things that has not been communicated enough is the communication element. So my poor child, all their dirty laundry gets aired at these meetings. Having gone through a lot of these processes, including the transitions, what I will tell you I've been most proud of, and I know it's something we as a board have talked about, is that communication, that transparency. And it sounds like from the presentation there's a lot of teacher, but the family is such an important element, right? And having a child who's met goals, right, and then come back, we have raised our concerns, and the team has listened, and that has guided us. I have felt, at least as a parent, we've always been involved in this conversation. And in times, particularly, I felt, my wife and I have felt that the teachers have listened to us, we know our child, and we said, hey, these things work, and then that started that conversation. And I know when I started on the board 6 years ago, there was some of that question and concern, and I think we as a board have done a really nice job. It's nice to see that it's more formalized from where it was 6 years ago, but I think that speaks to the work we've done over the last several years. So I don't want to leave out that family communication, and it's a two-way street as well, having called the school with concerns and then seen an SAT form in response to sort of address some of our own concerns and so forth.
Go ahead, Lynn.
Something I haven't really thought about until this moment, but the systems are fabulous to make sure kids do not get lost in any way, any step of the way. I don't know how many kids come new in the middle of the year. I don't know how big a population that is. But do you have a system in place so that we don't have to wait for the next universal assessment when a new student comes to your school?
I think Jess will speak from the district again.
So we do. We have informal screenings that we'll offer for our students who come in. And it kind of depends on the age of the student and where they are, of course. We might not screen kindergartners who are walking in mid-year, and we kind of anticipate that they'll only have certain background knowledge. But if they're coming in some of the older grades where placement might come into play, we certainly do have a screening process that we would utilize to make sure we're finding the right placement for them.
If parents needed to find out this information, where would they look? Is this information on our website? Is it something the schools have individually?
So one of the resources you'll see, and was mentioned when you, this folder will be shared with you of all of the presentation, and these are all live links yet. And so one of the things you'll see is some of the communication that's been sent out from our principals at the beginning of the year that list, the kind of who can help me, if you will. So parents and families can read through that and be made aware of the resources that are available to them and who the staff members they can contact directly if they have questions or concerns about their child. And again, so I know this was mentioned as well, but there's samples there for maybe 1 or 2 schools, but all of our schools share that information out at the beginning of the year.
Thank you, Jess.
I think it's important to note that we have a strategy with how we communicate pretty much everything, because if everything, and we've talked about this before, came out of my office or Jess's office or Jody's office, someone outside of the schools, we as parents just think this is general information that I may not need to see. And so we work at deciding what will come from the superintendent's office, which, as you know, I try to only send things that have to come from me and need that sort of attention district-wide, because otherwise people aren't necessarily going to open what comes if I'm sending something all of the time. So there's the Friday flyers from superintendent's office. There are things related to pupil services as a district from pupil services. But the things that we believe are most important for families to see are sent from schools 90% of the time, because as a parent, we know that you are more likely to open up what comes from your child's teacher or a staff or faculty member at your child's school or the principal of your child's school. And so we've made sure that these processes and referrals and interventions are communicated mostly at the building level, even though we work together on what the communications look like. So you might see a communication that looks very much the same coming from Roaring Brook than it does as it does at the high school, but that's because it's been put together behind the scenes to be sent by who it's being sent by to address specific grade levels.
All right, thank you. So we started with the data, and that's the accountability piece, holds us accountable and responsible as educators in the district to be tracking our students and their progress, looking for ways that we can improve. We then move on to the student assistant teams where we develop intervention plans. And then once those plans are developed, we need to think about the services that we have in place for our students and their families. And so here to tell us about that is Mrs. Fox and Mr. Hayes.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. So for our student and family services, our goal is to, have resources and be able to use them to support all of our students. And I feel like a lot of those supports have been mentioned on the previous slides. I'll recap them anyway. So we're able to do this by having a comprehensive staffing model. It is listed on this slide, but we have a very comprehensive staff ranging from social workers, board certified behavior analysts, to occupational therapists, and everything in between to be able to give our students what they need. They're able to do this in a very individualized way through IEPs and Section 504 plans, as well as through more short-term interventions, and also those things that just pop up that a student, for example, might be struggling with a loss in the family or a peer conflict. And any student, whether they have an IEP or 504 plan or not, can access these supports at any time. Also, in addition to these staff members being resources to support all of our students, they're resources to our entire building, and they are present in all of our buildings. As subject matter experts in their respective fields, they can offer any expertise they can, collaborate with any team, or consult, for the benefit of our students and our staff. You heard on several of the other slides, many of these team members participating in SAT meetings, supporting teams, to provide different types of intervention, not just reading and writing and math, also things like speech and language. We even do some motor SAT supports as well. So we really have the full gamut of supports to be able to provide to our students and staff.
So I will talk about our correct supports and what we're doing to support our choice students. So this year, we expanded on the pilot that started last year with the Bridges program. And for those of you who don't know about the Bridges program, so it's a program that is created to link our high school students with our elementary school students, especially our students who, reside in Hartford and who've kind of gone through the challenges that go with, getting on a bus at 5 o'clock in the morning, coming to school. So we connect those students. So the students who went to Pine Grove, we connect those students with students at Pine Grove. And thus far, the program is going splendidly. The kids are over the moon for their high school buddies. We're even starting to receive communication from parents to say, thank you for choosing my child for this program. My child can't stop talking about their high school buddy. So we know with our choice students that connection is an issue, and we wanted to make sure that we address that. So this is just one way that we found that we can do that. So we're hopefully going to be expanding that program, and that's kind of sort of our next steps. We also have, if you can go back one slide for me. Thank you. The Legacy Foundation. So we've partnered with the Legacy Foundation to pilot a program where we wanted to provide our students with an opportunity for some academic enrichment, but also as a part of this pilot, on Saturdays, they'll be able to do some experiential learning. They can go to the symphony, they can go sailing, they can sort of get some of the experiences that some of their peers might have, just so that way they can bridge those gaps, to hopefully bridge that sense of connection and support. We also have grant-funded family supports. So we worked really hard this year to try to secure as much grant funding as we possibly could, because we all know that things happen. things happen in families that will present a barrier to either academic success or social success. So with the funds that we were able to secure this year, when families let us know when something's going on, we can provide support in real time. So as one example, we had a family that was really hard on for money. They were really struggling, and they didn't have the bare necessities of pull-ups for one of their children. So we were able, to go into our funds and provide 2 months of pull-ups for this particular family. And it might not sound like a great deal, but for that family, it means the world, right? And that's a barrier that we wanted to make sure that we kind of knock down, so just to provide that support for those families. So we're doing things like that. So that's part of the supports that we're offering.
I just want to add it, I'm sorry, TJ, to be clear. The Legacy Foundation, the pilot that we are running there, very similar to what we started here on our own, actually, that 2 of our faculty members brought to pilot last year, and now we've done it at the district level. It is also to provide connections between our choice students and our Avon resident students. So there are students from both reside in Hartford and in Avon that are participating in the Legacy Foundation pilot, getting some of those enrichment activities and making connections together, doing those trips and activities. And we're just at the starting point of that. We've only had a couple of, I think today was the second meeting, right, besides the Saturday.
Yep. And that actually applies to the Bridges program as well. So it's not just exclusive kids to Hartford, but it's also other students as well that we trust that our building principals will be able to choose and, make those decisions, those students that might benefit from that additional level of support and connection. So it's not just exclusive to our choice students, but that is a focus.
So to talk about communication, this was touched upon to answer one of the questions that was asked. But all of the building administrators do send out universal communications to families related to what supports are available in every building and how to access them. We also do have that information on our website as well. If students are involved with any of the service providers that I previously talked about, there is more frequent individualized communication. That communication exists with students through sometimes a check-in, check-out, sometimes scheduled appointments or visits or sessions. And also with families, it is more frequent and individualized about their student, and we use a variety of communication methods. We know that families have a lot going on, and everyone communicates in a different way. So we email, some parents prefer phone calls, some still even prefer, handwritten, message in the backpack or a notebook, and, we're happy to do that too, because we do want to have that partnership to support our children.
And I'll just step in for the communication piece too. So because our students are a part of Open Choice, they get a lot of communication that we get from the CREC office, providing with different resources. So we have instituted a plan this year so that way we can disseminate that information out and make sure and ensure that our choice students are actually bringing that information home. So each building has a rep, and that communication, when it comes from CREC, will be actually printed out and also given to the students as well. So it's just adding an additional layer of ensuring that hopefully communication is making it home to the parents.
So some of our next steps, we are exploring some site-based behavioral health resources. This is a direction that, districts in the Farmington Valley and across Connecticut have gone in to provide another layer of support for students and families. So that's something that we're exploring. Also some next steps, expanding our unified sports program. So last year was our first year of having a unified sports basketball program at Avon High School, which is very exciting. Of course, we support all of our students no matter what sport they would like to play, but it was a really exciting step to be able to start a unified team. Which it was a great step for within Avon High School, but additionally it has given our students and staff the opportunity to connect with other teams in the Farmington Valley. And actually, and this picture was from a unified basketball tournament that Simsbury High School hosted, and there was about 6 other teams there. So there's been lots of great connections. Last year at one of the meetings we did mention there was even a unified prom that our students were invited to. So it has opened up, the doors in so many ways, not just within Avon High School, within the Farmington Valley community. So we are looking to expand that for next year to add another season. Basketball is currently in the winter, so to expand that as well. Some other steps that we're taking, to give more opportunities to our open choice families, we're going to be giving them different avenues to be able to access Avon Public Schools. Historically, we've opened up the majority of our seats in our preschool program. So if residents in Hartford wanted to send their students to Avon Public Schools, they would have to make that decision to send their 4-year-old to our preschool program, and then they would advance through the grades. And so we've looked at that. We've gotten some feedback. So we are going to expand those avenues of different grade levels that option is available for families. So hopefully we could be more accessible to families.
And we got such great feedback when we participated in the Resco Fair this year. So that's something that we definitely plan to engage in moving forward. The Resco Fair is housed, multiple times in a year. So we went to the initial event for the year. And so moving forward, we want to make sure that we're a permanent fixture there because it's a great opportunity for not only for parents that are prospective to our district to learn more about us, but it shows that we care. And it makes us present. So we just want to make sure that we are engaging in that more often. Also, we want to look at ways to engage our choice families in Hartford, finding different means to do that. We started playing around with some ideas this year, and we're going to keep plugging away at trying to find the optimal way to engage those parents the best way we can, meeting them where they are. And that's going to hopefully be done with a partnership via CREC. And also with our involvement with the Legacy Foundation, there's a lot of cross between the families and a lot of connection there. So we're going to try to leverage as much as we can to make sure that those parents know that we want to meet them where they are and we can do everything we can to support them.
RESCO, another one of our acronyms, Regional School Choice Office. That's an
Regional School
acronym
Choice
throughout
Office.
the state of Connecticut. No, that's
Yeah.
a Connecticut state acronym. And just, I believe all of the board knows this already, but in case not for some of our newer folks, that initial fair that TJ is referring to was held in Hartford, so that was another way of us going out into the community in Hartford and making some connections there. As TJ mentioned, we got a lot of feedback while we were there that Saturday, and we met in person a number even of our current families who were at the fair looking at what the options were. And one of the things we heard over and over from people was that I'd like to send my child, but it was a barrier thinking about putting, as he mentioned, a 4-year-old on a bus at the crack of dawn and sending them this far away. So in opening up seats, as you heard TJ say, and I think we spoke about that even at the last board meeting that we had, that was one of our responses to allow for some even of our other siblings, which we always worked to allow to come in to the school district for students that were already here. So I think being present there for the first time in years was helpful to us to be able to get some of that on the ground interaction and feedback with families really actually from all over the state, but in particular, students coming from Hartford.
Right, and it does make parents feel much more comfortable, right? When you can actually meet people.
They put
right?
names with
And put
faces.
names
They
to
knew who the
faces
superintendent and the assistant superintendents and the family and student supports coordinator was. They were able to talk to us in real time.
Yep.
Thank you. I don't know if you have questions about any of that.
So I know our ELL students are supported with ELL teachers. The group I didn't see represented there were children with hearing difficulties. Do we, not to ask if we have any in the district, but what is our approach that if we do have students with hearing difficulties?
We are able to support students who are hearing impaired. We typically don't have a large enough volume to have a full staff member. We do contract with an agency that has audiologists and teachers of the hard of hearing that work with our staff and our individual students to meet whatever recommended IEP needs or accommodations that they need. They also work with us for ordering the correct equipment and making sure that it's all functioning properly.
Thanks.
Sarah?
I just had a quick, question/comment. The work that's being done is incredible, so important. And we all know that the children's mental health crisis is unfortunately growing. I keep hearing you saying we're expanding and we're growing and we're doing more and more and more, and I'm just curious if you feel that there's enough, I don't know who I'm directing this to, but if there's enough support in place, kind of back to what Lynn was saying, is there anything we can do as a board to support you in this expanded work to support students? Because it does seem like there's so much growth happening.
So I think one of the important things, and we talked about, the board already is supporting us in doing this work because we moved this budget forward unanimously as a board, even with what you know is a historically larger increase than we typically propose. And a number of things in that, but driving that budget are related to student needs. And so I expect to see that we might continue to have conversations around staffing because, as you heard over and over tonight, much of what we talk about with students are individual needs. And so when we look at class size ratios, or we look at case management responsibilities for a school psychologist or a school social worker or a school special education teacher or speech and language pathologist, any of our pupil services providers, there's not a catch-all number of students that's the right number to work with an individual because it's very student dependent. We might have one individual who needs to work with 3 students, and we might have 15 students that can work together with a different individual. And over time, not just year to year, but week to week and month to month and within a given school year, those things change, both for the students we already have and for the students who come into the district after the start of a school year. So I think that's something very important for us all to always remember, particularly when we were talking about how we use our resources and what resources we need. You heard me speak quite a bit when we were going through the budget process about changes that were made to the existing budget that we are living in right now that came after the budget was approved by the board and the town last year. We had to add in numerous positions of paraeducators. We had to add in a special education teacher. There are often additional contracted services that we need that we do our best to project for, but as student needs change and our student population changes, as you can see every month we're coming and there's a change in enrollment, even if it's a few students, there's a difference in what we see from a previous year. And so I think we are working very diligently. Everyone out there in the schools is working very diligently to manage the needs of the students that we have with us right now with the resources that we have. But I know that it's always possible that we will be talking about other changes that might be necessary. And it's very difficult to always project what those might be.
Absolutely. And if I could just add, I didn't mention it when we were talking about communication, but just in talking about students' needs and, growing needs that, are kind of seen, everywhere. With our communication, I mostly talked about communication, within our buildings, with families, with students, but a big part of what a lot of our service providers do with families' consent, if they're working with anyone outside of school, potentially a private provider of, whatever it may be, occupational therapy or a counselor, oftentimes family, again, with their consent, they'll ask for the teams to collaborate with that provider so that we could really have a unified approach to supporting the student. And that's something that's very critical, to have that partnership, work with families as well as whoever they're working with outside of the school and with the school team. So that is something that is a big part of communication. It's not something automatic. Obviously, that's something that, we talk about with families and, they're on board with and they give consent for, but it is a big piece and it is an approach to take to really support the needs of our students.
And I think just to follow up and round out back to what we need from the board, related to what I just said about the needs of students and utilizing our resources, the other piece I think we always need to keep in mind is that our goal as a school district is to provide our students with what they need here to be able to stay here in their home school. So, thank you. So while we may seek additional resources that can sometimes be for a smaller group of students or even at times individual students, we are working to meet their needs rather than the need to outplace them somewhere else, which one takes them away from their community, their peers, and further away from their families. Two, generally speaking, it costs a lot more to do that than it does to put the resources in to our own buildings. And so I think that's something that, as we're out there having conversations with folks who might say, well, you have 300 less students in the school district than you did 10 years ago, but you have 10 more of these positions, or you're spending 3 times the amount in this line for resources related to X. These are the reasons why. Because, as I said, it's very difficult to quantify a ratio of what adults to students looks like when you are talking about meeting the needs of students. And post-pandemic, for example, I mean, I hope someday we're not really talking about this anymore, but for now we still are. We see different needs in our younger students that spent more time at home, that are now progressing through the grade levels, and it's one of the things that we think about as we are trying to put classes together, and we're thinking about class sizes. Contractual limits aside, we have to look at every individual class and every individual grade level and make decisions about whether or not this is a class based on its makeup and the student needs that can handle 15 first graders or 20 first graders. And I think that's another thing that we have to expect to see is a fluctuation in our class sizes, particularly in the younger elementary grades, where we're trying to make sure that we establish a strong foundation and make up, unfortunately, along the way, for some of our upper elementary students, for some of the deficiencies that still exist as a result of time not in school, for many students who were out due to illness or were kept home due to family illnesses. I've mentioned this before as a general example. We've seen students who have trouble cutting paper, for example, when they return back to school. Little things like that make a big difference when we're talking about student progression and performance. And we've done a fantastic job at managing it through the efforts of our faculty and our staff and our administrators. But the needs are still there, and we're still working through them.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Sorry. We have, though, because Sarah's point before regarding mental health and so forth, we have, if I remember correctly, over the last couple of years, increased counselors, social workers, and so forth. Right? The new budget included an additional guidance counselor as well at the high school to work on, right? How many
Correct.
have we increased in the last?
So the counselor that's in our budget, our local budget for the 23-24 year, we had already added in using ESSER funds, but we projected forward knowing that we were going to need to maintain the position. Right. So there is an added counselor at the high school. We added a social worker so that we didn't have a split between the middle school and Thompson Brook. We did that in the previous year. We added in, as I mentioned, a special education teacher even over the course of a school year. And correct me if I'm wrong, Susan, I believe 6 paraeducators over the course of the year.
We had 3 new that we are in the budget,
Right.
so to speak, just this past season, and 3 more the previous year.
I just couldn't remember. Thank you. I appreciate the info.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So the last piece of our work tonight is to talk about positive student behavioral supports. We have 2 of our most well-behaved principals here to talk about that. And why this is such an important piece is there's a great deal of work. We think about responding to students when they're struggling with behavior in school. We're fortunate here that if we really think about our discipline numbers, they're very low. And we think, and give credit to the work that's happening in the schools from the start of the year to set students up for success. And we think that when we do that, it leads to a more successful experience, our students knowing what the expectations are and having a good time at school.
All right, good evening, everyone. Somehow they gave me the microphone back. Christina Wallace, middle school principal.
Amy Borio, principal at Pine Grove School, K-4.
So we figured we would start with some of our strategies we use with students. So we're going to ask everyone to take a belly breath. I'm kidding. We'll get there. We figured at this point in the evening you could use a little more of our our humor. So as you'll see up on the screen in front of you, our work across all of the schools is centered around creating the conditions for students to be successful across settings as it relates to expectations and therein supports. That work is rooted in clarity, consistency, and is comprehensive in nature. We know that when expectations are clear, regardless of the age of the individual with whom we're setting the expectation, that they're intentionally taught, modeled, reinforced, implemented consistently, and take into consideration the whole child and the context in relation to that child, we create those conditions for our students to be as successful as possible. So some of the ways we communicate those expectations, all of the buildings have various iterations of opening in the year communications to families. To Jeff's point earlier, that partnership and that collaboration around those expectations is critical. The common language, what we say at school, what we're hoping will be reinforced through some of those sets of common language is one of those mechanisms that we use. Each of the buildings have some sort of town halls, grade level assemblies, various ways to get groups of students together to discuss what those expectations look like, sound like, feel like in different settings.
And at Pine Grove, we start the year off, again, setting them up for success by creating social contracts within the classrooms. So classroom teachers work with their students to kind of determine a set of rules, a set of agreements about how the classroom will run, so everyone feels safe, comfortable, respected. We also conduct grade level expectation meetings, so classes of students will meet in the cafeteria and discuss the behaviors that are expected in the cafeteria. So for example, we would ask them, what do we want our cafeteria to look like, sound like, and feel like? We do that in multiple shared spaces, so at recess, in our town meetings, and we talk about the hallways and how they should be feeling and looking and sounding. Students learn that those expected behaviors are expected behaviors. And then we discuss what happens if you don't follow those rules and what kinds of things will happen in terms of, reiterating those expectations. Sometimes we pull classes back to those spaces and say, let's do a checkup again and let's talk about what those expected behaviors are, who remembers what they are, and just reiterating because, as we know, little minds, need those frequent reminders, so we provide those as necessary.
So some of the school-specific expectations and therein supports that we create, as you have in your gift bags this evening, a reminder of Bo the bear to bring home with you each day so that you'll remember to be compassionate, be curious, be resilient, and be responsible in your kitchens and wherever else in your homes. And in all seriousness, we set those expectations with our students. We have that language around our school, and we do so through the lens of Bo. To help bring to life for students how we make positive decisions, what compassion looks like, what curiosity looks like, and so forth. We celebrate those expectations and our pillars in Bo through our AMS shout-out program. So teachers, staff members across the building, I actually had our cafeteria manager last week submit a shout-out, can submit shout-outs related to each of our 4 pillars. They're processed through our office. The teams often will recognize the students in smaller settings, and then we bring the students together monthly for town hall meetings where we recognize all of the students who've received the shout-outs that month. An area that we are looking to expand at the middle school that I know some of the other buildings already have pretty well vetted is more of the in-the-moment recognition, caught being good, if you will, rather than having it be something that is recognized at the end of the month, if you will, but more of those I just saw you hold the door for me, so I'm going to acknowledge that in the moment.
And that's a perfect segue to what we do at Pine Grove. And we do have those kind of recognitions in place. We call them Piney's Paws. Students can receive a Piney Paw for doing something that is demonstrating good behavior, good character, rather, based on typically the behavior the character trait that was identified at the last town meeting. So we might say, wow, look at this child who's being so responsible and, putting up their chair at the end of the day and putting up the chairs for all of the friends in the class, and that's a big deal, so we really want to recognize that. If at our town meetings, the other thing we do is at the end of the month, we will randomly draw Piney's Paws for students, and then we invite them to come and have pancakes with the principals. So that's a big, exciting moment. The recipe for the pancakes has been passed down from generation to generation of assistant principals. So I've recently passed it on to Mrs. Buckle. And there are times that we know we also need to educate our students on the impact of their actions on others. And one of the ways we do that is by engaging in restorative practices and restorative conversations. These conversations provide an opportunity for students to kind of fix the problems, to solve problems, to develop a greater sense of comfort in returning to the classroom as they have to kind of get back to work and work alongside their peers. So we have found a lot of success with that. Another strategy we use as an educational tool, both proactively as well as when a need arises, are our second step lessons. These are lessons that we provide to students in grades K to 4 at Pine Grove. I don't know if do you have pre-K? Pre-K as well, okay. And they're designed to teach students skills for learning so that they're ready for the classroom. And these include, typically you'll go into a classroom and hear eyes watching, ears listening, body still, as well as strategies to help them solve conflicts and remain calm. So those belly breaths are part of our curriculum. And then strategies in the recess playground, we'll often hear teachers say, did you identify the problem? Did you identify what solutions you could put in place? So they start having those conversations with them, and we do start to see students kind of articulate those independently with their peers, which is nice. Do you have any questions at this point? Okay. Is that you or is that me?
It's still you, but
It's
I can
still me.
pause
Okay.
for a moment. There you go.
So communication is our next slide. Communication at the elementary level happens quite frequently, as you probably know if you have children, or you might understand from an elementary point of view. Whether through email, phone calls, weekly newsletters, our teachers communicate early and often with our families. We want to help them understand what's happening in school, what their day was like. You know, if you have children, that when they come home, you say, "What did you do in school today?" And they say, "Nothing." No, of course not. So we want to encourage the families to be able to ask questions of their children. And so sometimes it's about the academics that are happening, and sometimes it's about what did you learn today related to second step, or what kinds of things are you working on in school. So an example of that would be our weekly correspondence in the school-based would be, well, let me start with APS, Friday Flyers, which you're probably aware of. And the schools we have trending now at Pine Grove, the AMS Minute, Blazers Bulletin, TBS Weekly Update, and the Friday Falcon. In the trending now example that I gave, one of the articles, the very first article on the left is an article that shares with parents the background of the shared space expectation conversations that we have. So those are the types of things that we would communicate to parents to let them know the positive behavior supports that we have in place.
So the other piece of the communication cycle, right, is we share a lot of information out, and then we look for ways to get feedback to then inform our future practices and partner with families in the larger community. So we have various methods for getting feedback from our students, from our families, from the community as a whole. The 512 grouping is relaunching the Principals Advisory Councils, and we actually just had our first relaunched meeting I think that was just last week, at the middle school, where we have district level administrators, school administrators, students, teachers, a paraeducator, where we actually went over the blueprint for excellence and talked about how that translates into the day-to-day operations and the student experience. As you know full well, when you get a group of students in a setting and ask for feedback, they tell you what they think, and they tell you how they see areas of strength and also areas of improvement. So we'll have quarterly meetings with the Principals Advisory Council and have that as a 512 structure, knowing that the pre-K4 groupings have their community council that are in conversations regularly with their building administration. In addition, we have a student council 512, in addition to the community councils pre-K4, that meet on a regular basis for some of those school-wide programming, events, and opportunities to give feedback with administration. Then there's other informal opportunities for feedback. Drop off and pick up, eating lunch in the cafeteria a few times a week. I'm a Taco Tuesday fan. Everyone has different preferences throughout the week. But when you are in a setting with a student and your authentic self, I know us as building leaders, those are critical moments to not only observe, see students in their element, and be proactive when we're looking at supporting students' behavioral choices and conduct scenarios. All of the buildings collaborate and have very active PTOs for their partnership and feedback cycles throughout the year. So as we look to next steps, you heard Amy refer to second step. It is now a pre-K-8 program in Avon Public Schools. We piloted our first lesson, 7-8, a few weeks ago. We have another lesson coming up in April so that that common language component, students are hearing strategies throughout their years that they can then continue to apply along the developmental continuum. And we're continuing to expand those principals advisory councils in the other secondary buildings. Any questions?
Go ahead, Thage.
We're fighting for it. Yeah. The AMS Minute and our newsletters that go out, are there options for families who don't speak English as a first language to have those translated when it comes up in their email to be read in a language of choice?
That's a good question. We don't have that right now. There are lots of different pieces that are listed in lots of different things listed in the trending now, and right now it is not something that we have available.
So one of the things we're looking at, a new program called Schoology that we just are learning about, and we're going to be putting in place next year, does have some better translation options. And so we're hoping that moving into the new year, the communications that we send will be able to be translated into multiple languages.
Families will be able to select
They
the
would
language
select it, yes,
that they
correct.
would like the communications to be in that new platform.
So I just had a comment saying how great the communications. I have a daughter at Roaring Brook School in second grade, and she looks forward to these emails. And we kind of look at them together. So just don't underestimate the power of these communications. And this is a perfect time for a shout out for Mr. Sturm and Ms. Horvath's snow day video. If you did not see it, it was phenomenal. So I just wanted to say that.
I think we should be careful of the Pine Grove principal standing here.
I
And
haven't
the assistant
seen yours
principals
yet.
back there. Yours was fabulous also.
Thank you. But in all seriousness, these types of things I think really are fostering community for the kids and the parents. So keep up the good work. It's great.
Go ahead, Nicole.
I just wanted to piggyback a little bit off of what Sarah was saying. As I was listening to you speak, I was thinking of the different schools and the different positive student behavioral supports that you have, and just listening to the kids, how excited they get either when they or a friend get some kind of recognition for their positive behavior and they're using the terminology that is in the schools and that you see in the hallway. It's just really nice to see that sense of community between the students and the staff, and it's a great job that's going on throughout these schools.
Lynn?
So I don't know if this is the next slide, but I mean, all of these are wonderful. They're kind of tier one, right? They're for everybody. Are you going to be discussing tonight your tier 2, tier 3 interventions for positive behavioral supports tonight, or maybe another night? I don't know.
Part of that.
If you'd like to stay, I'm sure we could pull it off.
I don't know what's next on your agenda.
No, we're getting to the end. This is it. And so there are some, as they've mentioned earlier, there are a number of examples when you click through the links that you'll see some of the other tier 2 and tier 3. But many of those, when we're talking about behavioral supports, are very much individualized. And often related to, I'm looking at both of you because I can think of many examples of even just the two of you have done and your assistant principals over the course of this year related to restorative practices and interventions for students. Maybe you could share, either one of you, probably Christina, I can think of, the 7th and 8th graders. are spirited young people.
Active's the word I like.
And as middle schoolers always are, I think that maybe an example of a positive behavioral support from the middle school might be helpful, and more of what might look like a tier 3.
Sure. And Thage, I wanted to touch back on the translation. I know my face looked a little puzzled for a second because you actually caught me in a moment of thinking. I know our one version of it is because it's a Google product that we push out, but the PDF version is that other Barrios. So that's when you saw that
So
puzzled
Google
look on
will
my face.
will translate
That's what
it.
I was processing. So a tier 3 level of a behavior support might look like a student who has gone through perhaps the SAT process. Perhaps there's been a series of similar types of, I'll say, low-level types of conduct needs. The SAT team might come together and look at, okay, where are these happening? What's the frequency? If you will, what's the antecedent? What's happening just prior? What's the behavior? And then what is the consequence, if you will? And not consequence in the sense of a lunch detention, but consequence in what is the reinforcing action on the back end, attention, avoidance, and so forth. And so an example of one I can think of right now is a behavior support plan where the student has really specific criteria about the first 10 minutes of the class period, the second 10 minutes of the class period, so chunking those blocks of time throughout the class, but then also looking at their success and transferable skills into those common spaces. We know that 90% of the time, don't quote me on that, that some of those conduct type scenarios may come up when you're not in a classroom with the teacher right in front of you observing and giving feedback. And so we look to chunk the school day into smaller chunks and look for those successes along the way to reinforce in a timely manner with either the school counselor, the team leader, an administrator, believe it or not, sometimes I'm a reinforcement, and make sure that we're capitalizing and giving real-time feedback to the student and the family. So that might look like a daily communication log about how that day went. That might look weekly. That might look period by period, depending on what we're looking to target and what we're looking to positively reinforce and then reduce as a result.
I think maybe it might be helpful too, and I was thinking of this earlier even when we were speaking about tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3, just for everyone's information to kind of remind us what those things are. When we're talking about tier 1, we're talking about what we would do for all students or any student. By the time we're at tier 2, we might be talking more about SAT, a student who's been through an SAT process and what that might look like. And generally speaking, when we are at a tier 3 level of intervention, we are working with a student with special needs, student with an IEP, student with a 504, a student with an individualized behavior plan. Not always, but generally speaking, when we are implementing tier 3 interventions, we are talking about very specific interventions for individual students, like the one you just gave.
And the reinforcement system, more often than any other type of external reinforcer, is that partnership and communication home.
Mm-hmm.
The power of, I'm going to sit down right now and send that email so that tonight you can go to ski club or this weekend you can go to X activity. That partnership is critical. And so that is an important part of whichever tier we're at, making sure that we're on the same page for the school-home partnership to have common expectations and then common levels of support.
I think it's important to note also, and as someone myself who my background is at a high school, to note that we do start to see a differentiation the further through the grade levels we get to. So in 9, 10, 11, 12, we're still communicating what's happening with parents, but we also, as high school administrators, might communicate more with a student than we will as with a third grader, for example. We might have more direct conversations about the interventions, what we need from the student, what we'll do to support the student, one-on-one with a student, and loop parents in also when we're still talking, say, tier 1, tier 2 level interventions. developmentally appropriate.
Should we close with belly breaths?
Thank you.
Are there any further questions? That was incredibly comprehensive, and it's always nice to see you all come up and hear your voices. So thank you for taking the time to prepare that for us, and it just really sends home the work that we're doing here is supporting all that you do that's so good and so impactful, and your legacy is our students, and we are so grateful to you for that. So thank you for being so good at your work. All right, so next, any other updates, Dr. Carnemola?
I don't think you need to hear anything else from me tonight.
All right, we
Thank
do
you.
not have any consent calendar items, no old business. We move into new business, talking about policy 5144, student discipline.
So we've had a number of conversations about this already. We did 2 reads at the policy committee level, and the board attorney joined us at the last one. I know many of you were able to either join in person or catch up with me outside of the meeting with questions you might have had. So I don't want to belabor this because I know how much discussion there has already been. On top of this, we had a conversation with either Jessica Ritter or Sarah Gleason, 2 Shipman attorneys earlier in the year. Depending on whether you were able to make it in the morning or the evening, you had one or the other. This was one of the policies mentioned as needing some updates. This policy that we have tonight that has come from the policy committee after these discussions is the model policy from Shipman and Goodwin. It incorporates a number of changes necessary as the laws in the state have changed, federal laws have changed, and also even just the regulations that the State Department of Education puts out. So all of those changes to date, because 2 weeks from now I could be back here telling you there's a new one that's not in this policy, as we all know, but to date, everything that we need to have reflected by state law and regulation and also in our own practice is reflected in this policy. And just see if there's any other questions that maybe we haven't answered before tonight.
Are there any questions about the policy? Laura?
So we did have robust discussion at both the February and March meeting, and I'm assuming that everybody here has had a chance to read through those minutes. There were many, many questions, and a lot of discussion was had, really, I thought, that was very productive. In this policy, one of the big differences is the way in which possession of cannabis is different than it used to be in the old policy. There are places where the word may or must appears in the policy, and I think it's important that everybody understand those differences. We discussed that at length. There's a lot in here. It's a very thorough policy, and Shipman has made it clear that this is where they think we need to be in terms of basically completely deleting our old policy and going with this one. It's a lot, and I just hope that everybody's had a chance to read through it. We are a district that seeks to practice restorative practices, and I think the administration's done an amazing job at moving towards that. Whether or not it needs a second read or not, I think is really for everyone here tonight to discuss, because it could be pushed through tonight on a first read if that's where everybody really felt they didn't have any more questions, or it's really what everybody feels and thinks.
Thank you for saying that, because the other thing I wanted to say similarly is we brought it as a first read with possible action because we are looking to make sure that the district and the board is covered in terms of our legal requirements. This is a policy that's used very often by our school administrators, and the current policy that we have on the books does not lend itself to an accurate usage when we find ourselves in certain positions. The a couple of examples that Ms. Young just brought up. And so what we do as district administrators is utilize what we need from the policy that's in front of you tonight because it's what's from the law that we have to follow. The problem with that is that when we are working with a family who, for example, and/or a student who might find themselves in a more severe disciplinary situation, that's more often when a policy like this is looked at, for example, even by the family and the student. And when what we are telling them as the administration doesn't match what's in writing in a policy that we publicize, that's an issue for us as the administrators. And I think you already know that where I stand as the superintendent on this and tell the administrators all the time is we follow the law even if it's at odds with the current policy. And so sometimes that's a conversation that we have to have until a policy gets updated. And I think that's why we ensured we spent so much time on this discussion and questions and going through scenarios at the committee level to ensure that we had discussed every single portion of this. And I appreciate all the time and effort that Laura put into the same with me behind the scenes and taking questions from board members and so on. So I think it's important to know how much, as we both already said, discussion has already been here, but also to say to you the reason I ask, if it's possible, that if you're not comfortable with it going through on a first read, then we'll be back with it in April, because the bottom line is what's not accurate by law in here anymore, we won't utilize anyway. I just think it's in the district's and the board's best interest that what we publicize and say is our policy is a reflection of what the law is and the actions that our administrators take are.
So is there any concern with voting tonight? Does anyone want to let it breathe longer? I think it's more just for comprehension. It's not
Right,
for-
no, I'm ready to vote, and I want to, realizing that there's a downside to waiting, I think, unless there's a good reason to wait. I never understood the downside, but now I do, and I personally have no problem. I've read it carefully, you've answered lots of questions personally and in committee. I don't have a problem with the vote tonight.
Unfortunately, some of these laws changed even as of January 1st, right? And so that's how we find ourselves sitting here catching up in March. So we're not the only school district, but it is important.
Perhaps, Dr. Carnamola, since those of us who were present at the meeting and who have exhaustively gone through this do understand all the nuances and differences, perhaps you could just give a brief, quick overview of the more important ones or the more glaring ones that the attorney pointed out to us that are so different.
So as Ms. Young mentioned earlier, as you know, the Connecticut state law has changed related to possession of cannabis. Obviously, that is for people that are of age, not typically for our students. However, it's still illegal for you to be in possession of cannabis when you are under the age of 21. However, what the policy states is directly from Connecticut state law, which is that whatever the consequences are that might be enacted for a student in possession of alcohol, which you also have to be 21 or older to possess, again, not legal to have here at school, not okay to have here at school, or for a young person, obviously, to partake of. We're hoping that it's not something we ever deal with, but occasionally, as you know, we do. The law now states that whatever the consequences are for cannabis would be no more severe than what they would be for possession of alcohol. And in the past, that had not been the case because cannabis wasn't legal in the state even for people over 21. So now, I guess we would say that since the law in general in Connecticut is equating alcohol with cannabis, and that if you're 21 and older, you can use it recreationally, therefore, students in schools are not to be penalized in different ways. That was not always the case, clearly, by the way the law was. That is a major difference that is in this policy. There are other small but important changes that have to do with notifications of families and the methods in which we do that, phone calls, emails being added in as a way to be able to notify parents if we're unable to reach them on other ways, what the timelines are for notifications related to expulsion hearings is another change that we have seen in the law. Being clear about what the definitions of some of the terms are, including deadly weapons versus dangerous instruments. That's important because a deadly weapon is something that requires an expulsion hearing, and therefore what the law defines a deadly weapon as is important to have in the policy because by law we are required to have an expulsion hearing. I think there's language that has clarified teen dating violence, which comes straight from the law. There is language related to bullying that has been updated in the law that is updated in this policy. Technological devices, as you know, we've had to make some changes on technology policy too to ensure that we are catching all of the different types of devices that might be utilized. You know, in the past, we wouldn't have been talking about Instagram, for example, or those type of social media platforms. We might have said something, you know, just related to text messaging or blogging. Now those terms have been updated. I'm sure they'll continue to be updated, and the law and the board attorneys keep coming up with more general terms to make sure that they are catch-alls. Speaking of, another piece that is a tweak here is related to academic dishonesty and the blanket terminology for that so that it encompasses any form of academic dishonesty because, as you know, we're having a lot more conversations in schools these days about things like artificial intelligence and chat GPT and smart watches and virtual glasses and all types of things that I'm sure Tom Klein could speak better to than Bridget Carnamola, but that's why the terminology is blanket for the types of items that might be utilized that are related to technology. Those are some of the major changes. I don't know if there was another one maybe that you wanted, anybody who was with us discussing thought maybe I should point out.
Those were definitely some of the ones that we had more lengthy discussion around, and that there were questions asked by emails and of you in person.
So otherwise, if the board is comfortable, we could take action. Does Jackie have any questions? Okay. Laura, would you like to make the motion?
I will make the motion then to adopt the Shipman and Goodwin Model Student Discipline Policy Series 5000 as presented.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Jeff. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And we have Jackie, so it's unanimous. Thank you. Our next item is Policy 6172.1. This is new. It is a policy on the equitable identification of gifted and talented students.
So again, we spoke about this as a board with board attorneys in the legal advice sessions that you had earlier in the year, that this was a new requirement by Connecticut state statute. For us, it is not a change in process or procedure in the district. Rather, it is a reinforcement of what we were already doing in our district. However, the statute specifically stated that every Board of Education in a public school in Connecticut had to have a policy that outlined what we do and ensured that it met the state requirements by law and by regulations. A lot of this policy is governed by Connecticut State Department of Education regulations that are a result of the law. So this is the model policy with just a couple of changes to make sure that it met our Avon standards for the process. As most of you remember, and those of you who were at the policy committee meeting who may not have been here back when we did this as a board and a district, we implemented a new process for the equitable identification of gifted and talented students several years ago when we added in, had a robust discussion about our process then and added in the OLSAT testing for every third grader as a means of standardized testing for talented and gifted. It's a nationally normed test, and we have had that in the budget and a part of our process for several years now. So that is one way that we meet the state requirements. That's not specifically said here because that's not what the policy entails. That's a part of the process. But to be clear, this is the policy that the law requires you to have as a board. It requires us as a school district to have this process in place, what is listed here, and obviously many other pieces behind this that we have to oversee and implement in the school district. And having this is on as a first read tonight, this is not a the earth is going to shatter policy. If we don't vote it into existence tonight, everything that's here we are already doing. The only issue with it is that the law requires that you as a board have it. It already required that. It's another change that came along that we needed to put in place this year.
Any questions or concerns about moving it forward?
Do we need a second read?
That's basically what I'm asking is, do you have a concern with voting on it tonight, or would you rather have a second read? All right,
I think we've had multiple conversations, whether at the policy committee level, in executive session. I don't personally see a reason why to wait and hold off on a second read on this policy.
All right, looks like there's consensus. Does Jackie have any questions? Okay, Laura, would you like to make a motion?
So I would like to make a motion to adopt the policy for equitable identification of gifted and talented students, policy 6172.1, as presented.
Do I have a second? Thank you, Lynn. All in favor? Aye. Jackie as well? Okay, that's unanimous too. Thank you. And our final policy for the evening is policy 3543.31. This is new as well, electronic communication use and retention.
So we have retention policies for records already in compliance with state and federal law related to FERPA for students, FOIA for the public, and what we do not have until the board takes action on this policy is one specific to electronic records. Obviously, we have been advised by council to put a policy in because more and more of our records are electronic. So that said, we have been following our records policy that we do have, 1, 2. You'll notice that a lot of what is here is very similar to another policy, which actually is on the front burner, no pun intended, NOM, of the policy committee meeting for our upcoming meeting, which is policy related to staff, 2 policies, which we recently updated, but yet again, there are changes required by law, both the staff use of technology policy and the student use of technology policy. And again, with all of the technology that we use, those are important policies, they're important regulations to have in place. A lot of this language mirrors what's already in those 2 policies, as you might expect it would, because those are technology policies and these are related to electronic records and information. So again, this is not something that is going to damage us as a district if it doesn't get voted in tonight. It is a recommended policy. We should remember that the difference between having this policy, voting on this policy and not, is not having one. So up until the board votes this policy in, we don't have a written policy about our electronic records and the storage and how they will be maintained. And as you know, we have had a number of conversations about the heavy lift that it is and the amount of money that we spend on our servers to back up all of this information right now for eternity, because we don't have a policy that governs it. And until we do, we won't do anything different. That said, we will only do something different prospectively. From the time a new policy comes in about how we manage our electronic records, we will just continue to store every electronic record that we have had since the beginning of time. That takes up a lot of space, as I just said, costs additional money in servers and maintenance and so on. And also, it is not the best for our security of our technology. See Tom Klein nodding his head there. We have, I think we've talked about this before. We've been recommended by, we work with an outside firm to test the network security on top of what we do inside and to provide recommendations, as most public entities do now, with the amount of data that we are protecting that is electronic. And it has been a repeated recommendation from that firm that we work with, Whittlesey, to implement an electronic records and storage policy that would allow us to make changes to what we keep and for how long. That's what this is that has been recommended by the board attorney.
Go ahead, Laura.
So just of note, what I had found interesting, or I guess of note here, one thing had to do with the policy describing that the records shall only be retained as long as necessary. And that's obviously something the district would determine what is as necessary. But it also, the policy talks about the delete function and personal passwords. And basically, for monitoring purposes, there's a lot. It's a very short policy, but it's a very comprehensive policy in a very little amount of language that I think does protect for an area that we just don't have any language for at all at the moment.
And necessary means different things, because there are, as I said, there are record retention laws from both the state and the federal government, and what they say we have to maintain for as long as we have to maintain it is what's necessary for certain. And the reason the policy utilizes that language is, as you might imagine, the laws change. And so to ensure that we continue to be in compliance with whatever is deemed necessary by the state and or federal government, or what we as a district decide is necessary. In addition to that, this policy covers us to stay in compliance. And so, again, the rationale behind it being the model policy is, as the board members who were at the policy committee meeting heard from Attorney Sarah Gleason, technology continually changing, which means FOI requirements are continually changing, which means also means student records and the retention of them are continually changing. Adopting the model policy means every time one of those federal or state requirements change, we will get the update from the attorney for the policy to change, instead of sitting and talking about a whole new policy again or trying to play catch up with a different policy.
So any questions about this? Prepared to move forward? Does Jackie have any questions? Okay, Laura?
So then I would like to make a motion to adopt the policy regarding retention of electronic records and information, policy 3543.31, as presented.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, Jeff, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And Jackie? Okay, that passes unanimously as well. Thank you. So now we're at our communication from the public, the second section. Did anyone stay with us long enough to want to speak? All right, seeing no one. Communication from Avon Board of Education members. Anyone? Jackie? Till? Okay.
Let Jackie know that we have her bag. You can hear me, Jackie. We have your bag of goodies from our students. I know she would probably want to be able to say thank you. That's why I wanted to make sure I said that. We'll come back to her.
Okay. Good. Anyone else?
I think someone was about to unmute. I'm sorry.
I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
All right, we're good. All right, seeing none, then do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Jeff. I'll have a second on that. All right, Thage, all in favor? Aye. We adjourn at 9:49 PM. Thank you.